right, here in LA for Super Bowl week, and joining me now, he worked with the Ravens, Browns, and Eagles during his time in the league. He's the host of the Move the Sticks podcast. He's the lead draft analyst at NFL Network. It is Daniel Jeremiah. DJ, thanks for taking the time. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yep, I know. I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, a lot is happening right now in the NFL. NFL Network, of course, has their special 8.5-hour edition of NFL Game Day Morning this Sunday at 9 Eastern. So, a lot happening here this week in LA, and then of course let the offseason begin and draft season heats up, and that's when it all goes crazy in your world. Before I dive into some draft stuff, let me start with the Super Bowl matchup, and I'll start with the Rams. I know you're very into roster building and how every team does it. I'm curious to hear, what do you think of the way Les Snead has done his roster building? Basically trading first-round picks every year, banking on those mid to late round picks, the compensatory picks, and just the roster formula that he's put together. What do you think about how he's done it getting to this point right now?
Well, I think it's smart. Obviously it's easy to say that when they're in the Super Bowl, but I think when you look at it, I think there's one element that maybe people don't mention as often. I think we talk a lot about the fact that they traded premier picks for premier players, but I feel like what gets left off is at premier positions. So in other words, like juxtaposing what they've done with maybe Seattle trading 2-1s for a Jamal Adams as a safety. They've gone out and acquired quarterbacks, corner, pass rushers. Like those are guys, those are positions with first round value. So if you're parting with first round picks, you don't want to be in a position where you're having to find first round positions in the draft because you don't have that pick. What do they need every year? Well, you need to go find a safety. You need to go find a guard. You need to go find a linebacker. Well, you can find those guys third, fourth, fifth round. And then they get them, they develop them, they identify them, they develop them, they get their 3-4 years out of them, and then let them walk. And then the comp situation, gets rolling, and you just keep cycling through those guys. Now it puts some pressure on you to be able to hit on those, but this hasn't been a situation where they've entered a draft with 2-3 picks. I mean, they've got 7, 8, 9 picks almost every single year. They're just a little bit later, but when you're not, they're going to the used car lot. But they've already got the shiny new cars at all the important positions. So it's no big deal.
Yeah, and really what makes it work is the fact that they're able to hit on all those picks, right? You got Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, Akers, Fuller, Higbee, John Johnson when he was there. All those guys picked after round one, and they're hitting on those picks, which makes it possible, of course, to trade those ones and get the guaranteed players like a Ramsey and a Stafford. Let me flip over to the Bengals here. Bengals fans have obviously been waiting a very long time for this. It's crazy looking at this matchup because it feels like all the advantages side to LA. So what are like some of the keys for Cincinnati? Obviously they have Burrow and we've seen the magic, but what do you think are some of the keys there for them to actually go on top and win this game?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's two things. I think, the offensive line just being able to hold up enough. I mean, and I say that they can give up 3 or 4 sacks in this game and still have a shot. If it's a Tennessee situation and they're getting sacked 8, 9 times, like that's not going to end well. They were very fortunate to get out of there with a win. So to me, it's just being okay, being functional and salvageable along the offensive line. And then they got to take the ball away. I don't see a scenario where they win this game unless they can generate turnovers, which they've really kind of done, a tremendous job of on this magical run they've been on. They've been able to take the football away. If Matthew Stafford protects the football, it's hard for me to envision, the Cincinnati Bengals winning this game. I don't see how that really happens. I think the Rams are in a better position right now roster-wise. But, we've seen other Super Bowls where, not necessarily the most talented team wins. But this feels like, being honest, this feels a lot like when you had Kansas City without their tackles against Shaq Barrett and JPP. And you can analyze the game a million different ways. And then I always came back to the same thing, like, how are they going to block those guys? And I just don't know how Cincinnati's going to block this front.
Right, that's going to be like the most interesting part, but there's so many different storylines in this game, but seeing that offensive line against that defensive line, how it all holds up, will be fascinating. Of course, this playoffs, we've seen so many crazy things happening, so we'll see what obviously happens here on Sunday. Of course, Joe Burrow was the number 1 overall pick just 2 years ago, and they're 1 win away here from winning the Super Bowl. But let me shift over to this draft, because we just got back from the Senior Bowl, and Jim Nagy and his crew once again did a phenomenal job. It's a very unique draft. There's a lot of depth, there's some quality players, but it's not as top-heavy as usual. Let me start at the quarterbacks. What do you think of Liberty's Malik Willis? I mean, it looked like he was probably the best quarterback there at Mobile, but how high could this guy actually go?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's a great group, in terms of what we've maybe seen over the last few years in the draft. But, Malik, I came into the week having, Pickett as the top quarterback. He's my 18th overall player. I left there even after he really struggled in that Wednesday practice. I think when you take the totality of the first, the third practice, and then the game where he was very efficient, I still think he's the safest pick. I would still have him there. But Malik, to me, with what he did, particularly on that Wednesday practice, where it's pouring rain and it's windy and he's driving the ball, and then you can see him also with the athleticism throwing on the run. I think all the raw tools he has is he's the toolsiest guy in the entire draft. And I got a chance to spend time with him. I think he's a great kid. He's got a great personality. He's intelligent. He's going to put in the work. So he's somebody to me that you want to bet on, that he's going to be able to figure this thing out in the same vein that maybe he's not as far along, but you saw the Mahomes and Herbert and Josh Allen progress and just keep on developing. I think this kid's on that track. He's just starting a little bit further behind.
Yeah, I mean, I also got to talk to him there on Wednesday when it was pouring rain. It obviously stopped after, but like a very genuine kid. I know he's working with Quincy Avery on some stuff. Obviously, it's very early. I did find it interesting that Mike Tomlin was on the field when it was pouring rain and watching him very closely.
Everybody thinks he's going there, by the way. Just being down there and being around NFL circles and buddies, everybody's like, well, he's going to be a Steeler.
That was literally the entire talk on the field while I was there. Yeah. I mean, watching Tomlin, Colbert being there and just talking about him. While we're on this, Pittsburgh topic, you mentioned Kenny Pickett. He struggled mightily during that rain day, and he didn't measure his hands, which I wanted to ask you, is that like actually a big deal in NFL circles? Does that like actually bother you? And like, again, where do you sit on him right now after this Senior Bowl?
It used to be a really big deal. People would kind of obsess over it. And then I think somewhere along the line, common sense kind of entered into the discussion where it was like, okay, Mahomes does not have really big hands. Burrow doesn't have really big hands. Like they're right around 9, maybe a little bit. I think Jared Goff was right at 9 as well. Yeah. And to me, especially with a guy, like that, he's played in cold weather. Now I got to go back and look in previous years and see if I can find him playing in some bad weather games and see what those look like. I'm sure that's something every team in the league is going to be doing. But to me, it wasn't really a concern coming into this. Now, coming out of that game, out of that practice Wednesday, yeah. And whether or not that's just hand size or whether that's just him not being able to really power the football, I'll leave that up to the teams. But I don't think it's obsessed over as much as it used to be maybe 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, and it looks like he will actually measure at the combine, so everyone could like finally calm down about this topic. But I mean, like that day when it was announced that he's not measuring, I mean, like just looking at social media, it felt like everyone was going crazy about it. But everyone relaxed. It looks like he will do it there at the combine. Let me shift over to some coaching hires. The Jaguars just hired Doug Peterson as their head coach. A very weird process how they ended up getting there, but someone who's been there, done that, pairs up with Trevor Lawrence. I know it might be a little bit early, but like looking at that hire and looking at the fact they have the number 1 overall pick, there are some pass rushers. There's a pretty good offensive tackle class. Which direction do you think that team should go in to try to elevate Trevor Lawrence and now having Balky and Peterson there holding the reins in Jacksonville?
Well, it's kind of ironic. We're talking about Jacksonville having the number 1 pick when Lawrence came out, right? Okay, a lot of people, myself included, very excited about that. Then you look at Joe Burrow being in the Super Bowl. Yeah, the Bengals had the number 1 pick. You love that. This is one of those years where it's like, you don't love the options that you have there. I think to me, you can go into last year's draft and you could probably find 7, 8, 9, 10 players that would be picked before anybody in this class. So it's not a great top heavy group. I kind of go back to the thought of this first pick has to be about your quarterback and helping him out. Even if you have, whoever your flavor is on the defensive side of the ball, for me it would be Hutchinson. Even if he's your top defensive player, if it's close with one of those offensive linemen, I think you probably lean in that direction and just try and devote as many of these high resources as you can to get your quarterback up and running, because he didn't play good. He just flat out did not play well last year. And you've got to not only be able to get him going for the success of the team, but you don't want to let this dude go too low into the valley, and then it can be hard to get him out of there. So they've got to devote all their resources to getting him up and running. If they have a top 5 pick next year, Ari, and the quarterback's proven and playing better, I think they'd be fine. If they're back there picking in the top 5 next year and he's coming off a year like he had this year, now you got problems.
Right, and that's really where it becomes an issue. And it feels like, again, the Jaguars' path to hiring Doug Peterson was a very odd one. A lot of people are talking about, Leftwich and the GM and do they want to work with him? But it feels like everyone universally agrees that this is like a great hire for Trevor. And we'll see how that goes. Of course, once the Super Bowl ends, we'll be talking a lot more about the number 1 overall pick. It's interesting about Kayvon Thibodeaux from Oregon. at one point he was like the projected number one guy, and now people are talking about the effort might not be there and the tape wasn't as good last year. Is he someone who could actually slip down and actually go down to like 5, 6, 7, 8? Do you believe that's something that could happen, or is that just all talk right now?
It's funny to me, right? Because, and one of the benefits, quite honestly, in working for the league is that I don't come out with my list until January, till the junior declare day. I can't put out a list. So I always get asked questions about this guy rising or this guy falling. And I'm like, look, the first thing that I put out, he's my 6th player, I think. So I never thought he was the first or second player. Once I got in and really dug into the tape, I just didn't see that. Right. So to me, yeah, I think it's absolutely within the realm of possibility that he does not go in the top 4 or 5 picks. And to me, my issue was, and I know he battled an ankle injury, but I think he's a little bit stiff. I don't think he's quite as big as everybody thought he was going to be. And then the effort just wasn't great. So you combine all those things together, and I'm sitting there picking up there in the top 5. And while it's not a loaded top 5, like I feel like Hutchinson's got a high floor. I feel like Ekwonu from NC State's got a high floor. The safety from Notre Dame is a really, really good player. He has a high floor. I just don't know. I don't want to have a swing and miss on my resume with the top 5 pick. And I think Thibodeaux, while he might end up being a really good player, and I think he's very talented, I think there's some swing and miss capabilities there.
Right, and that's where it becomes very interesting to me. I know, again, it's very early, but the Giants and Jets both could use pass rushers, and they both have 2 first-round picks in that top 10. Could they pass on him with their first pick and then come back around to get him with that second first-round pick? Maybe that'll be worth it. But again, we'll get to the full draft talk here once everything is over in LA with the Super Bowl. We spoke about the vacancies here earlier with Doug Peterson. Yeah. All 9 are now finally filled. We got Lovie Smith in Houston, Dennis Allen in New Orleans. Everything is now filled. Your favorite fit came where?
I think I'm going to go with Daboll with the Giants, just because the job he did with Josh and the hope of getting Daniel Jones up and running. I do think Daniel Jones has got a lot of ability. I know he's been kind of a punching bag for a lot of folks in the media, but I think they've been atrocious up front along that offensive line. I've known Joe Shane for a long time. He's really sharp. I think they will, even if they have to move around some resources on their roster, I think, they're not a great salary cap situation, but I think you could see them making trades, acquiring picks, and maybe trying to move some pieces around to put a better offensive product around Daniel Jones. And maybe that's at the expense of some wins this year. But I think this is all about evaluating him. And I think with Daboll and Joe Shane, you get a chance to do that.
Yeah, interesting that Shane actually came out this week and mentioned that he wants to get as many, hits as possible in this draft with those 2 first-round picks. Could be a possible trade-back team. And they already filled out their coaching staff here. I did find it interesting that Daboll hired a guy like Kafka and Martindale, 2 guys he really hasn't been with around, but it's let's just get the best guys into this building. Of course, they bumped into each other in the past, but I love guys who go out and do that. You mentioned the Jets earlier as well. I know you've worked with Joe Douglas. I'm curious to hear, what do you think about the way he's done his job so far there, and what do you think about Zach Wilson entering year number 2?
Yeah, I think, look, it's probably not where they want to be at this point in time, but I think it's weird where you start the clock. For me, I kind of start the clock with when Saleh came in the building. He got a chance to hire his coach. He brought in his guy and Robert Saleh. I think they absolutely crushed this last draft. When you look at that, I think they're going to have 5 or 6 starters in that group in terms Vera Tucker, the way he played, Michael Carter, the running back, Elijah Moore, the other Michael Carter, who's one of a really good young nickel in this league. They did a nice job in that. And then Zach, I thought you saw, once he came back off the injury, I thought you saw him play better. So I'm very optimistic about him. This is the offseason. This is the one, kind of that turning point where I think you start to see that flywheel start to spin a little bit, and they can get some momentum. And the combination of the picks that they have with the pick capital and the free agency money they have, this is really their time. And so I'm excited to see what happens. I'm sure there's a couple do-overs. Joe would love his first draft in 2020. But I could also say, man, when Becton was healthy and on the field, he was as dominant a young tackle as we have. So they've got to get him back in shape and get him back to where he was. But no, I'm optimistic, and I think this is going to be fun to watch how they put these pieces together this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. And again, the Jets have 2 1s. They have 2 2s as well, thanks to the Sam Darnold trade. The one, of course, came from the Jamal Adams trade. So they are loaded there when it comes to the draft class. And they were just now there at Mobile coaching everybody there in Alabama. Last one here before I wrap this up. You obviously know a lot of the people who are doing the behind the scenes stuff around the NFL. There's a lot of people inside of a building. But I wanted to ask you, I want you to give maybe hope to a fan base here. A team that
Yeah.
probably didn't do well right now, but a team that you feel like, they have the right people in the building. I actually see them doing well here moving forward in their future.
Ooh, that is a really good question. Let me look at that real quick. I'm gonna pull up my team list here because the Jets would be one that would come front of mind, who I know have struggled. Let's see here to go through the rest of these groups here. You know what? Who I like. I think is kind of a dark horse coming off of an 8-9 season, which wasn't that bad. But the Minnesota Vikings. I like Kevin O'Connell, and I know Kirk Cousins is kind of a punching bag for a lot of people. I think Kirk is to me is established as a 10 to 12, top quarterback. He's maybe not top 8, top 10. He's right in that 10 to 12. You can win with him.
Right.
And I think with Kevin coming in there, who believes in Kirk, and everybody in that Shanahan tree loves Kirk Cousins. It's incredible. They love him.
It's amazing.
So I think having them on the same page and the weapons that they have, getting some pieces back healthy on defense, I think a good offseason. I mean, you're talking about the Minnesota Vikings being a team that's very much in contention to win that division next year, and I think that could be a quick turnaround.
Yeah, but that NFC North will be an interesting one to watch, of course, with Aaron Rodgers, what he ends up doing. And Kirk actually worked with O'Connell, I believe, for 1 year in Washington, so there's some familiarity there. They do have to figure out what to do with his cap charge. It's about $45 million, so that will be up to their new GM, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, a lot of people actually really love. But we'll see exactly what happens there. A very big offseason ahead for Minnesota as they look to get back on track with a new regime. All right, Dan, I really want to thank you for taking the time today. Everyone can go and follow you on Twitter. It is @MoveTheSticks. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and hopefully we can do this again during draft season when you're going to be all over the place.
That was a lot of fun, Ari. Thanks for having me, bud.